gosh, excuse me guys. Welcome back to String and Story. My name is HollyAnne and it's my job to guide you to quilt and to live with confidence. Welcome to the other side of my sewing room. Oh, all right, time to get the diffuser going. Clearly, the season has caught up with me. Say hi as you guys are hopping on so I can see you and greet you as you're joining me. Ooh, I've got water in here already. Let me see, what do I want to put in? Let's put in some lavender because that will help. Hey Nicole, hey Nancy, hey Dana Lou, hey Francie Joe, hey Winifred. Would you guys believe I was all ready to roll? I was so excited. I'm going to put lavender, peppermint, and wild orange in here to help with the seasonal things that are happening. And I got everything all set up. I was finishing getting ready, and I spilled water all down the front of my shirt. So, here I am. Tardy and sneezing, but excited to be here with you. Excited to talk about spatial awareness for free motion quilting. I think this is a topic that I don't know that I've seen addressed quite the way that I want to talk about it with you guys today, and I'm really excited about. Oh, you all can still see me. How fun. I'm normally off camera if I'm way over there. So I would normally do a video like this down in our library where there's the nice quilt rug and it's real pretty, but Hubster's working from home today, so this is kind of the long narrow corridor of my sewing room, and we're gonna do our time together here. All right, let me see who is here. More snow. I saw that there was snow in Maine, and I'm sorry that you got some too, Nancy. Hi, Mom. How are the boys? Are they crazy? Probably. All right. I do take a look at the caption of this video. We have a question of the week this week. I want to know if you have any pro tips for how you hold yourself accountable to have good posture while you're quilting. Please share those with the group if you have any. I just think all the tips are a wonderful thing. Hey, Julie. And if you answer the question of the week this week, you'll be entered to win a copy of my Orion quilt pattern, which these are fun. They're little foundation paper piece hexagons in a square with little diamonds. These are, of course, optional diamonds in the sashing because they're teeny tiny. But it's so much fun. It's great for fussy cutting. It's a great I Spy quilt. It's a great quilt to kind of putter away on as leaders and enders between other things. And it's one we hadn't talked about in a while. So since Ian is with my mom and did not need his quilt at the moment, I figured I would borrow it to show you guys the Orion pattern. And I'm going to give one away this week. Now, guys, you should know this is so much fun. The Dogwood Blossoms quilt patterns and Lanterns of Hope quilt patterns are just flying out of here. Now they're digital, so they can just continue flying. But I think that's so fun. I can't wait to see all the spring and summer versions of those quilts start to pop up. And if you've not had the opportunity to make Dogwood Blossoms or Lanterns of Hope yet, this is a great time of year to do it. Especially if you have, for Dogwood Blossoms, if you have fat quarter bundles that have been sitting around and you're looking to start doing a little spring cleaning, you're like, I really want to use this fat quarter bundle but haven't found a good pattern, Dogwood Blossoms, great, great pattern. Aw, hi boys, how fun! And half an inch of wet snow, oh my heavens. Oh my heavens. Okay, other things you should see in the caption of this video. There's a link to this week's blog. Guys, it's a doozy. I started writing it and was like, oh, and I still have another section, and I still have another section, because there's so much I wanted to share. And I was going to make recommendations about essential oils to use as you're doing some of these exercises, and the blog was just too long. So there's a quick link over there to a video we did a few weeks back about being aware of self-care and wellness and oils you can use as a quilter. Please refer to that. I have some of my favorites here with me. I have my deep blue rub, of course. What else do I have? I've got a cheer roller. Love a good cheer roller. Frankincense. Here's what I'm looking for. Balance and frankincense. My balance is downstairs, unfortunately. Hey, Deanna. You pretend that you have a string pulling your spine straight to the sky. That is a great tip, Dana Lou. I love that. Tip to keep moving. You set up your project wall at the other side of the house, so after each wall you have to get up and move. Oh, I love that. Oh, well, you can just stand there in front of it, and kind of ponder your work in progress and stretch out. I love it. All right, I already have lemongrass on because I encountered a very unsavory man at CVS today who felt like it was his business to undress me with his eyeballs. So I already put some lemongrass on to get rid of the yucky vibes from that. And I'm going to add some frankincense just to bring the balance back and let's bring in some nice Frankie joy, right? All right, I love that tip, guys. These are great tips. Deep breathing. Lower back soreness. Okay, Debbie, if you click over to today's blog post, you will see, I think it's down towards the bottom. Let me make sure I know exactly where this link is so that I can direct you accordingly. Under the last section, right underneath the triangle pose, there's in bold print, it says other gentle stretches like these. Click on that. That's a link. And it will take you over to stretches for your hip flexors. So your hip flexor, it connects to your femur and up around to the back of your pelvis. And it's what helps your leg do this number, right, to lift your leg. But if that is tight, it pulls on your lower back muscles. So a lot of times when you've got pain going on in your lower back, you can fix it by addressing your hip flexor, right? I love massaging deep blue on my hip flexors. I love diluted lemongrass on my hip flexors, frankincense, which is going to help with things like inflammation, and then stretching it out. And you'll see stretches inside that blog post to help you with that. And I highly encourage you to incorporate them in with the stretches we're going to do today. All right, that was a great, great question. Let's see. Good morning, Rhoda. Be sure your arms are at a right angle. That is a great tip. Great, great tip. All right. So what is spatial awareness? Let's start there. If you were with me Sunday night when we were quilting some of these swirls, you know that I went on, for lack of a better word, a bit of a rant about posture while quilting. Hey, Lori. And not rant as in a kind of way, but in a earnestly wanting to share this with you kind of way, right? And what I realized is I've talked a lot about body positioning when you're quilting, right? Like we talked about making sure your abs are engaged and your arms are at a right angle, and that you've got this like slight elongating through your lower back as you're lifting your chest and your shoulders are down and back with that little pinch between your shoulder blades, right? And all of these things, these same principles apply if you're sitting in front of your domestic machine too, right? You just look like this instead of standing, right? Your knees are bent. That's pretty much the biggest difference there. Keeping your like head over your shoulders and not extended back. But what I didn't talk about is sometimes if you're paying attention to your posture, then you're like, how do I see, right? Because often what happens is we're bending over, we're slouching, because every sewing machine has a blind spot, and it's often right here, right? Oh, this is great. I love this wide angle, guys. It's right here. It's right behind your foot. So when you're quilting a swirl, you quilt to the center, and then your problem is you almost immediately have to work, and where your stitching is falling essentially ends up in your blind spot, right, as you're working back out of your swirl. I notice this a lot with pebbles too, where you're having to judge the distance between where your needle is and something that is behind your needle. And that's tricky, right? And you end up slouching because you're kind of trying to do this, right? You're trying to be looking at this at an angle so that you can see. And I get that, but what I want you to do instead, hey Laura! Oh yes, absolutely. And Debbie, holler if you need more help. And Debbie, do you see, I didn't mention this yet, do you see at the bottom of the caption of this video, I say if you're interested in adding doTERRA essential oils to your quilting and wellness practice, to email me about the upcoming Spoil event. The Spoil event is a week-long event on Facebook. It is free. There's a couple of posts that go up each morning that you can review at your leisure. And I send you samples of the oils that we talk about during Spoil. And one of the samples is this deep blue rub that I love for my hips. So if you're interested in having something that will help, that you can massage into your hips, that will help you relax as you're doing these stretches, and you haven't had a chance to try this, please email me and I'll get you in that class and I will send you the samples, okay? And that applies to all y'all, okay? If you have not had the chance to go through Spoil yet, and you've been wanting to do that, and you're curious about wild orange, peppermint, lemon, lavender, on guard, or deep blue, those are the 6. If any of those have caught your attention as I've been sharing about them and you're like, I just really would like to try it, please, please, please email me. Spoil starts a week from Monday, so I have lots of time to get you samples and get them sent to you so you can go through that class, okay? So we're trying to deal with this blind spot, right? And instead of using your body to compensate for what your eyeballs can't see, I want to help you train your brain, right? And I talk a lot about this in this week's blog post, that essentially what we're doing is we're making a mind map. when we quilt, right? Think about your house. If you close your eyes, you can picture the layout of your house, right? You know where the furniture is in relation to each other, and you know where the furniture is in relation to the wall. And if you're standing in a room and you close your eyes, you probably can picture where you are in relation to the room around you, right? Now, I just recently rearranged because I moved the light and the tripod to be able to video this. But if I hadn't done that, there's a decent chance I could close my eyes. My sewing room is a circle, right? I've used my sewing machine and my cutting table and my desk to form an island in the middle of the room. There's a pretty decent chance that I can close my eyes and walk that circle without ramming into stuff, right? Because I have a great mind map of this room and where things are in relation to each other. Because I've spent a lot of time in it, I've spent a lot of time walking around it, right? Now, what we're doing when we're free motion quilting, that would be awesome, Debbie. I would love that for you. I would love, love, love that for you. Hey, Sue Marie! That picture of you and your siblings yesterday was darling. I just felt like you should know that. Yours just really stood out to me for some reason. I just thought it was darling, and you looked great in it. So anyway, sidebar. When we're quilting, the challenge is that you're essentially making a temporary mind map, right? For basically the rest of my life, I'll probably be able to picture this room, right? I can still picture like my childhood bedrooms. Probably all of them, let me think. Yeah, from about the time I was 4, about Jim's age, I can picture all of my bedrooms and the ways that they've been arranged, right? And those are deep, permanent memories because I've spent a lot of time in those spaces, right? Your relationship in terms of building a map of this quilt as you're quilting it is a bit fleeting. So it's temporary, but it's a skill worth developing to be able to make and hold that mental image as we're quilting. Because what that's going to enable you to do is that even when you're quilting and you're moving away from yourself and your needle is moving through that blind spot, you know what's going on back there, right? Now, and I mentioned this in the post too, there is no shame in stopping, right? So if I start to swirl away from myself and realize, I don't know, my mind map is not sure how far it is from my needle to that swirl back there, and I'm gonna need to get that right or I'm gonna swirl. Remember, there was a swirl, I think it was on Sunday, that I just like straight up went into the swirl next to it and was like, my map broke, right? Like I had that wrong in my head, and there's no shame in stopping. Use your body to move and look, but then return to that central, quilting neutral, if you will, before you continue stitching. Don't be doing this while you're working, because then you're gonna hurt everything, babes. You're gonna hurt everything. All right. Now, some of you, hey Linda, hey Veronica, hey Jan, I'm so glad you guys are here. How fun. Oh yeah, try not to hold your breath, Sarah. Do try not to hold your breath. Now the good news is, if you're going, HollyAnne, I'm only this sure what you're talking about, much less like, can I execute it? I have no idea, right? Now, chances are, especially if you can close your eyes and picture the room around you, your brain is already doing this on some level. You just haven't paid attention to it yet, right? A lot of what's going to be going on with making this map as we're quilting and holding on to it and executing according to that map is subconscious. Hey, Lydia! It's subconscious, right? But there are still ways to develop those skills consciously, right? Some of them I talk about a lot in Intro to Free Motion Quilting, Beginner Free Motion Quilting, etc., right? I talked to you guys about doodling. I talked to you guys about making a quilting plan, okay? What we're doing here when you're doodling, you're building that hand-eye coordination of, I want to quilt a swirl, I'm going to draw a swirl, and it's going to look like what I pictured. But if you fill a whole page with swirls, and those of you who have gone through my classes, I always encourage you, fill a page with your doodling, fill a fat quarter with your quilting. Hey, Pauline! And the reason for that is because I want you to have to work through space, right? Drawing a swirl and going, look, I can do it, and then taking that skill to a quilt, you're likely, I'm not going to say it infallibly, but you're likely going to have a little bit of a breakdown, right? Just because you can make the shape doesn't necessarily mean you can then repeat that shape over and over again in a space successfully, right? You might be able to. You might have a really well-developed spatial awareness skills, right? I was a pre-professional ballerina in middle school and high school, okay? I spent a lot of time developing a lot of awareness around really tiny muscles in my body, right? Like, I'm really intimately familiar with my own hip flexors. That's something we really care about in ballet, right? The positioning of hips, open versus closed, right? We spend a lot of time knowing where different parts of our body are in relation to each other, and often in very odd configurations as dancers. So when I started free motion quilting, I had a lot of spatial awareness, and it was a relatively short learning curve once I committed myself to practice, right? But if you've never done something that has really called upon your spatial awareness skills, and especially called them kind of into the conscious level of your mind, this might feel really hard. It's okay for it to feel really hard. You can do hard things, okay? I know that sounds like a little bit of a silly sentence to say to a lot of adults, but you can, and sometimes we forget that. You can learn new things. You can bring this up into your conscious mind, okay? So continue doodling, fill spaces, right? That's why I was saying with this quilt, those of you who have been quilting along with this quilt with me, which I'm really hoping we'll finish it today, and I'm hoping to get to take you guys along for the ride. But I was practicing these slightly different swirls that are much more like a closed circle, all sitting next to each other. And I said that one of the reasons I decided to do that on this quilt is because I've been wanting to learn this motif. And I've drawn it a little bit, but really the way to learn it is to have to fill a space with it, right? And this is probably not a queen size quilt, it's probably a double. It's either a really large twin or a double. It's a big quilt, a real big quilt. We'll find out exactly how big it is when it's done. I'll lay it on the beds. And so I've made a lot of progress in my understanding of how these swirls fit together because I've filled a space, right? So fill spaces with your quilting. Don't be afraid to stop and get your bearings, right? And help your brain do this. Yes, breathe, breathe, breathe. Breathe, breathe, lots of breathe. In fact, often if I know I'm going to be doing something challenging, I'm standing here talking about wellness drinking coffee, which I just find kind of ironic. There's nothing wrong with coffee, I just think it's kind of funny. You know, I feel like I should be like drinking water or like a protein shake or something. That feels like it would be more on brand, but no, the coffee is actually more on brand. So, I mean, I love water, but the coffee is more on brand. Breathing, if I know I'm going to be doing something challenging, I will make sure that I'm either diffusing mint or I have a mint oil on me. I talked about this on Sunday. I will put deep blue down my neck and shoulders because it's a cooling sensation and it will make me aware of those muscles. Or I'll take past tense, which is a roller that also has some mint oils in it, and do the same thing. If I'm finding myself, you know, crunching here, this is very common. We sit in chairs like this, or like, you know, and I'm collapsing my rib cage instead of lengthening and engaging my abdominals. I will put deep blue or past tense down my back, so I'm very aware of those muscles, right? And again, it's that bringing things that our body does subconsciously, bringing it up into our conscious mind for the sake of improving our skills, right? All right, so these are things we can do on a micro scale, right? These are little tricks with oils, doodling, practicing just a lot, being unafraid to stop and get our bearings so that we can train our brain to be paying attention to that mind map. But what can we do in a macro scale, right? Things that are going to make us aware of our whole body as we're maintaining posture. And if you master the gross motor of spatial awareness, it will make you more aware in the fine motor, right? And this was a connection that I think I've been chewing on for some time, but I felt like it really clicked on Sunday when I was talking to you guys about the midline. And this is something I'm really careful about, right? Like our body has a midline that if slicing sounds terrible. If you were to take a Sharpie and draw a line down the middle of my body, I'm more or less symmetrical on each side, right? And so much with our body in terms of our spatial awareness is navigated around this midline, right? Often, particularly if you are even like mildly to moderately ambidextrous, which hand you pick something up with is going to be way more determined by which hand is closer, right? Also for babies, this is jumping, for babies it's a big deal when a child begins to reach across the midline, right? Because to some extent children don't really understand, because of the way our brain is wired, they don't really understand at first that something over there I could pick up with this hand, right? And I'm likely to do that because I'm a little bit ambidextrous. But especially as you develop a dominance and you begin to learn about the ability to cross your midline, a baby learning how to reach over here to grab something like that. That's a big deal developmentally, right? Because the midline is an anchor point for our brain, right? Our brain is divided in half, signals are going back and forth across, right? So learning how to frame your quilting around your midline as well, and making sure that, you know, your belly button and your needle are in line with one another, and then you're creating this awareness of the space around you from there, aware of your muscles, aware of how your body is positioned in relation to that quilt, how the needle is positioned in relation to that quilt, how you are in relation to the needle. Your brain makes these connections of relationships, and you can strengthen that by making sure that you've developed this big body awareness and this awareness of your midline before you quilt, okay? I know this is like a really nerdy way to look at quilting, okay? And some of you are like, yeah, no. Okay, that's okay if you're like, yeah, no. Tuck this in your back pocket in case your friend needs it, right? But some of you are like, oh, now this makes sense, right? You felt it, right? If you're quilting and you find yourself, you know, you're off center, you know, your quilting will get wobbly because your brain has a harder time tracking something that's way over here than tracking something that's right in front of you. Okay, let me check in just a hot second. All right. If you have questions as I'm going along, do not hesitate to interrupt me, all right? Now, I'm going to take you guys real quick through 4 basic yoga poses to make you more aware of your midline and more aware of your balance, right? Now, you're thinking balance, HollyAnne, I'm either standing on 2 feet or I'm sitting while I'm quilting, which, yes, you are. So, it's, you know, it's not like you're quilting like this. My secret desire is to be able to quilt like this. Okay, I'm gonna go on a sidebar here because I feel like I can't make that statement and leave you hanging. So as a ballerina, there's what's called adagio, right? These are slow, controlled, precise movements of the body that usually involve balancing on one leg, right? I totally have this secret desire to be able to do an adagio while free motion quilting. But that's like that's just me being ridiculous, okay? So to put that into a more relatable stance, the reason that I think that could be physically possible is because it's all about developing how aware I am of my midline, right? And being able to have the body awareness. So I want to help you build your body awareness for your quilting. Oh, Jan, that's so interesting. Yeah, and that's the thing is, the immediate payoff of this is I think you'll see your quilting improve just because you're thinking more critically about your process. The longer term payoff of this is I want to help you prevent injury. Because can you see this like ballerina coming out of me? Anyway, I want to help you prevent injury because poor posture ultimately will injure you and it will make quilting painful. And I so don't want that, right? I want you to be able to be fit and quilting for all of your life, right? And if you have any kind of injury, quilting related or otherwise, I want you to be able to make a recovery from it, all right? So 4 quick poses. The first is simply standing mountain pose, which at first glance is gonna look a little bit silly, right? But this is where I was talking about kind of quilting neutral. This is your body's neutral position, right? My legs are directly under my hips. My hips are directly under my shoulders. This is my body is at its most symmetrical, right? If I do this, my body is no longer symmetrical. You see that? Because of the way I've shifted my weight. If I do this, it's no longer symmetrical. If I do this, right? So putting your body in that neutral, its most symmetrical position, all right? I'm thinking long thoughts through my legs and through my hip flexors. My abs are engaged. All right, I'm gonna try to scoot so you guys will be able to see this. Okay, so here is my abs not engaged. You know, you can, my little bit of mommy pooch, right? My running is paying off, so it makes it a little harder to illustrate this. But you can see there's a curve, a convex curve, I'll exaggerate it, a convex curve in my lower back, a concave curve in my abdomen, right? This is slouching, this is the opposite of engaging my abs, right? So I'm wanting to lengthen this, so my abs are gonna become longer and flatter, my lower back is gonna become longer, and it creates a little bit of a concave curve back here, instead, flat curve across the belly, all right, or like lack of curve, flatness across the belly. And there's a lifting. See this? Like I get taller, right? So my rib cage is more over my sit bones, right? If you think about how your pelvis is constructed, you've got like those big wings on your pelvis, and then you've got the like little knobs underneath. This is, you know, if you sit on a horse, this is the part, or on a bike seat, that's the part that's going to get sore, right? Is where those little knobs are. And so if I am slouching like this, my rib cage is over my tailbone. Do you see that? Rib cage, tailbone. But when I lift, I'm putting my rib cage over my sit bones, right? And I hope you're at home doing this with me, right? Like I want you to put some thought into this because I can only describe it so much. I want you to think about it and feel it and build that awareness, all right? So, yay, Lori. Okay, so my chiropractor and I talk about this a lot. So some of this has come from my chiropractor, and he and I comparing notes, him as a chiropractor and me as a ballerina, because we just nerd out on this like a lot. Hip joint, yes. You need to pedal with your left foot and right. Oh, that's a very interesting thing. So the other thing I would consider looking at is those saddle seats that push you forward and they force your hips to be even because you don't have a backrest, right? So you can't lean back. You've got to be up and balanced or you'll literally like fall off the thing, right? Working on bending, sitting, and squatting. Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. So, Dana Lee, what you could do if you need to pick something up, I'm sidebarring slightly, but we talked about this when April did yoga with us, but if you need to pick something up on the floor, you know, ideally you would squat, which I'm super tight right now, but ideally you would literally squat down with a flat back and sit your butt back, right? But if you've got a bad knee, you're avoiding bending. If you're going to bend and not bend your knees, bend at the hips, right? So don't do this. See how I just collapsed? Lift and bend. Now this requires you having really stretchy hamstrings, right? But that might be easier to work on than the bum knee. So we need to get you some deep blue for that bum knee, babe. That will help as well, okay? So body neutral, right? We're symmetrical across our midline. I'm lifted so that my rib cage are over my sit bones. My arms are at my sides, but they're not like, often when we relax our arms, we do this, right? And you see, I already lost my abs. So keep them engaged. You're gonna feel a little bit of tension right here because those engaged muscles on the back of your arms are gonna hold your arms at your side, but also hold your shoulders back. So you're getting a little bit of a pinch, right? So this is my standing mountain pose, body neutral. This is where I begin any of my yoga flows. Honestly, when I can remember to do it, my favorite thing is to get up in the morning in a big stretch, go to the bathroom because that's what we do first thing in the morning, and then I drink about half a bottle of water, maybe a whole one if I'm being, you know, feeling ambitious, and then just stand there. Maybe put a few oils on. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Now, you notice I close my eyes. Remember, your eyeballs only see physically what's around you, right? They can only take in so much. Now we have depth perception. If you're like me and your eyesight's really bad, sometimes depth perception is a little bit harder, right? But I want you to work on, I think the word is proprioception, right? I want you to feel with your body where you are rather than looking with your eyeballs. Remember that your body literally has electrical pulses, right? Use the energy of your body to feel where you are in space. So close your eyes so it's not a distraction. Be aware of your body first within itself and then within its surroundings. And breathe. If you only do this before you begin your free motion quilting, you will center yourself. Deep breathing helps with blood pressure. It helps if you're having anxious feelings. It will help with that, especially you notice I put like copious amounts of frankincense on my head before we started. I could have put the deep blue and past tense on as well, right? If you just do this before you get started, you'll be starting your body from a more centered place. What y'all often don't see, unless I do a poor job editing my videos, is when I'm doing a free motion quilting video and y'all are right in front of me, especially on the domestic, but on the long arm as well, what you don't hear is right before I greet you guys, I hit start on the video, I put my hands on the quilt, I close my eyes and I go. and I center myself in relation to that needle and that quilt, right? I just take a moment and feel it rather than see it, okay? And again, I hope you'll go do this so you know what I'm talking about. You kind of have to do it to begin to feel that click, and you have to slow yourself down and focus. This is focusing at its finest, right? And then I will begin talking and filming. And then what I do when I edit is I just cut that part out, right? Because like that sounds super creepy just to hear somebody breathing behind the camera. But I'm doing that. I do it when I'm not filming, but it happens when I film as well, all right? And sometimes y'all may see that if I'm doing a live, right? Okay, so standing mountain pose. From standing mountain pose, to continue increasing your bodily awareness and your balance, begin to shift your weight one direction or the other. Oh, I can't quite read that. Hang on just a second, Debbie. Lower back surgery in January. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I have a big fluffy pillow that I keep in my seat. This is the one that flips down and I sit on it, and then I say funny things like, oh darn, I'm sitting on it, you know. But it's because I put it here because it reminds me not to, you know. Yeah. All right. So standing mountain pose. Next we're going to do tree, right? So from standing mountain pose, shift your weight over to one leg. We've now broken that symmetry. This is like the kid learning to reach across their body line, right? We're going to learn to balance out of balance, if that makes sense. So we're breaking the symmetry. We're going to learn to balance out of symmetry, okay? And we're going to begin to lift this leg. Now tree pose is resting your other leg, putting the flat of your foot against your standing leg, right? So notice, this is a trick that you learn in ballet, because I'm balancing away from my midline, right? But you can move your midline, right? So if I try to balance over here, which is literally just leaving my body where it was and lifting my leg, I'm gonna have a much harder time doing that. Engage your abs, especially right along your sides, okay? I want you to see where that is in relation to my belly button so you can feel it. So I'm lifting my shirt. And literally move your ribs over. So my sternum is now over this hip joint. It's no longer centered between my two sit bones. It is over one sit bone, right? And balance. You can do the same thing here. You can adjust how high you want your leg depending on your comfort level. If you, this takes a lot of ankle strength to balance on one leg. So if you're not used to standing on one leg, make sure you're near something you can grab if necessary. But also know this is great strength training for your ankles, right? So if you have a tendency to roll your ankles, right? I have a tendency towards this. I have to work to keep my ankles strong, right? So this is a great way to strengthen your ankles, is balancing on one leg. So sternum, I've moved my midline over this sit bone, foot bent. This is what we think of when we think of tree pose, right? And there are two ways that you can up this challenge, right? Or three ways. One is by how high you raise this leg, right? Because you're changing your balancing more every time. The other way is you can raise your arms up and lift your gaze. Because I'm looking at an intersection on the Lanterns of Hope quilt that's right behind you guys, and using that as my focal point in order to balance. But that's also, again, I'm keeping that in line with my midline, right? As a point that's straight out from my nose. But again, we can mess up that midline even further by lifting our gaze up and our arms as well, right? The third way that you can increase this is closing your eyes. Now this, you're gonna feel it in your inner ear. Please be very careful if you decide to try this, especially if you're not used to doing a lot of balancing exercises, because I don't want you to just topple over and not know you're toppling over, right? So have something you can grab if necessary. And you will find it's a lot harder. You can see I'm struggling a lot more, right? Because I lose that visual input and I'm forced to use the fluid in my inner ear in order to balance, is what's going on there, essentially, okay? And then you'll repeat on the other side. So again, from standing mountain pose, shift, lift one leg, and balance. I had a period of time in 10th grade where I did yoga fairly regularly at our local YMCA, and I was very much the youngest person there, and I had just come straight out of ballet. And so the yoga instructor loved to see what she could make me do. And so she would always have me do tree. and then close my eyes like this, just to push me further, right? Okay, so tree, standing mountain pose, tree. I think the next one I did was dancer. I'm making sure I'm going in the same order as the blog post. Yes, dancer. Now, this one, if you do the full pose, is a bit of a doozy. All right, just so I'm gonna warn you now, I'm not very good at the full pose, which is hilarious to me since I was a dancer, but it's been a long time. It's been 10 years. Okay, it's actually been, no, it's been 11 and a half. It's been a while. Okay, but this is a great one for your hip flexor. This also really opens up your chest. This is a pose I should practice more, because as I shared on Sunday, I have a tendency to crunch my chest in, right, which is so bad for like my clavicle alignment and scapula. Anyway, so I need to open up my chest. This is a great pose for that, right? So from standing mountain pose, I'm going to do this sideways so you can see what I'm doing. I'm shifting my weight, again, moving that midline, and lifting my recently freed leg, and I'm going to catch it with the same arm, okay? Do you see how this is already opening up my chest? I'm holding on here because I'm liable to fall over doing this one. So there is no shame in holding on during any of these guys. And then I'm going to begin to press my leg up. And I want my hip, like my leg and hip, to all be in a straight line behind my body. I don't want my leg way out here. And I don't want my leg way over here, right? I want it to be straight out from my body. And I'm going to lift it up, and it's pulling and opening my chest. So I've got my palm to foot, and I press. And I want to leave my back as open as, or my back up as much as possible, and free this arm and look over the fingers, okay? Now, the adaptation of this is going to be to not go so high, right? Again, this is a lot of strength building in your standing leg, that ankle and knee. Please be careful, all right? So you might only go to here, right? Or even here, right? Just catching that leg, making sure it's all in alignment, and balancing. So what I've done now is, in addition to shifting my midline to one side, my weight is now behind me, right? The weight of that leg is behind me. So if you think of a plane, an XY axis, when we're in standing mountain pose, we're at 0, 0, right? But when I begin to do a pose like the tree pose, I'm moving down that X axis one direction or the other, right? When you then do a pose like the dancer pose, you're then shifting along that Y axis, right? You've got your chest is going further up the Y axis while your leg is going down it. And the way that that shifts your weight around, again, you're calibrating and rebalancing that inner ear. And then you do it, of course, on the other side as well, which is, oh, my far much less flexible side. Keep that chin up. And hold, okay? Did you see that dancer impulse to extend? All right, that one is a doozy. Play carefully, right? But it's a good one because of the way it shifts your weight around on those axes. All right, finally, triangle pose. This is another two-footed pose, but you're changing the way that you're balancing by putting your head below your heart, okay? So our body interprets that differently with that whole inner ear calibration I was talking about, right? So again, from standing mountain pose, I'm gonna turn one foot, this if I was on a yoga mat, my toes would point towards the end of my mat, and keep my other leg with the toes pointed towards the side of my mat. So my feet are now at right angles to each other. And I'm gonna extend this beyond hip width. Okay, you see how we're again breaking up the way that our weight is balanced from not being in alignment with our hips, right? We're shifting away from that midline. I'm gonna keep my hips turned towards, let me make sure I've got this right, yep. Turn towards you, so towards the side of the mat, and shift my weight towards the back hip, which looks really funny when I'm just standing here like this. Arms up, and begin to tilt. And this is where our head goes below our heart. The full pose, you're gonna drop your hand all the way to the floor, and turn your head and look up at the ceiling, seeking to keep your hips in alignment towards the side of your mat. All right, now, that again is a really elongating hamstring stretch. So this tilt, by the way, watch this. Lift and lean, right? We're moving our rib cage free of our hip so that we're not collapsing the rib cage under ourselves in order to bend. We're actually lifting it over the hip, okay? Lift over your hip, rest your hand either on your thigh or on your shin, depending on how deep of a stretch you want down your side, and look up at your hand and breathe. And again, if you drop this all the way down, you're going to get your head all the way below your heart, and that's going to be just a totally different feeling of balance, all right? And then I'm simply going to switch my feet, except I got to scooch so I don't hit the long arm, and go the other way, all right? Do everything in balance, so what you do to one side, do to the other. Your body is an algebra equation. Which is worth mentioning, right? Like Debbie, that's why it's good for you to switch which foot you're doing with the pedal, because your body's an algebra equation. And whatever foot we have on the pedal, we have a tendency to jack that hip, right? I do this all the time. I'm gonna go get that hip adjusted this afternoon, in fact, right? So by switching it up, we tend to keep ourselves more towards center, right? Okay, so 4 poses: standing mountain, tree, dancer, and triangle, okay? I know that these are probably outside of your usual way of moving. That's kind of the whole point. Please do not put pressure on yourself to do them a certain way, other than that I want you to do them safely, and I want you to be mindful of where your body is, right? I've written descriptions of how to do these exercises in my blog post. Feel free to consult those who know more about yoga than I do on the interwebs if you're unsure. And if you have any hesitations at all, please talk to your doctor before doing any of this. I do not want you to get injured, okay? Any questions about everything we've discussed today and how it relates to free motion quilting, or how to execute it to help your free motion quilting, or anything like that? Also, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. These poses pair really, really well with the hip flexor poses we did back in December. There's a link to that blog post and video in this week's blog post, and I encourage you to look for ways to do those together, right? Like even this dancer pose is very similar to the stretch we did for the hip flexor. So it might be that you go from standing mountain to stretching your hip flexor, ooh, which that feels really good, to switching your hand around and practicing your balance, right? Oh my gosh, Jenny, I cannot believe it's blizzarding. It is April, right? And then on this side, because my body's an algebra equation. So standing mountain to stretching the hip flexor to practicing my balance, right? So look for ways to integrate those together. Continue to stretch and move your body as often as possible, because taking care of your body is absolutely key to your free motion quilting success, right? We talk about our scissors and our sewing machines and even our hands as being valuable tools in this journey, but we don't talk about the rest of our body. And I think that's a mistake, to be perfectly honest. There's me making a strong opinion on camera for you. I think it is a mistake that we as quilters often neglect the rest of our body, right? We're mindful of our fingers to not get them under the rotary cutter, not get them under the needle, but we're not careful about moving, stretching, strengthening the rest of our body. We're not as careful about what we put in on and around our body as quilters. And I think we do our body a disservice, because it's a huge part of what we do. And there's way more of a full body engagement with quilting than I think we have given proper attention to up to this point in quilting history, at least in recent quilting history, to my observation and research, right? And part of what I want to be doing with you guys is educating and empowering you to make this a full body experience and to take care of your whole body, so that quilting isn't just part of your mental wellness. Use it to spur you on in your physical wellness. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. It's something I'm really passionate about, and it's something that the more I dive into, the more I get excited about it. That is amazing, Jenny. That is amazing. Absolutely, Sarah. You're walking up to 11,000 steps a day and your back feels better. You know why your back feels better, Jan? Because when you're standing and walking, you're stretching out your hip flexors. That's awesome. That is so good, because when we are sitting in a chair, you can see it, right? If this is my hip flexor, think of my fingers as my hip flexor. If I'm going to bend my leg, I have to bend my fingers. And then I have a fist, right? Not an elongated hand. So when we're sitting down quilting, that's when our hip flexors are at their shortest, and they tighten, they freeze there, right? Just like if you're holding a bag on your arm, those muscles will begin to cramp and freeze in that position, and it's, you have to kind of shake it back out, right? Especially if you're like me and you carry all the grocery bags in one trip, and you're like, I am woman, I've got this, but then you're like, oh, my bicep, right? Yeah, so taking your breaks, taking time to stretch, walking, actually ceasing to sit as much as possible, which is difficult, right? As quilters, we're gonna sit some, unless you set your machine up so you can be standing, which is super cool if you can do that, by the way. But Jan, well done. Well done. You're doing an excellent job taking care of your body, and you're seeing the results. I'm so excited for you. That's amazing. All right. My dears, thank you so much for spending this time with me. This was a long time together today, and I really appreciate you joining and sticking around. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I do. I hope you'll go experiment with and put into practice some of the things that we've talked about today. And if you haven't already, if you have tips or tricks for being aware of your posture and maintaining good posture while you're quilting, be sure to put those in the comments so you can be entered to win a copy of my Orion pattern, which I'm excited to share with one of you this next week. Again, please check out my shop and my classes if you're looking for new quilts to make or new skills to learn, especially free motion quilting. And if you've been looking for a way to add doTERRA essential oils, I'm sorry, I'm about to cough. There we go. To add doTERRA essential oils to your quilting and wellness habits, but you've been hoping to try them before committing, I would love to have you in the upcoming Spoil event. Please send me an email at stringandstory@gmail.com for more information, and so I can send you the sample kit and get you added to that event. That's something I'm really, really excited about as well. All right, Jan, Lori, Debbie, Nicole, all of y'all have an absolutely wonderful day. And I might just see you guys later for a little bit of free motion quilting. So go hop inside the Quilting Rockstars group and keep an eye out. I'll try to give you a heads up before I get started. All right, bye guys, have a great day.